Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your time in India. As I say, if you did, can you raise your hand? Oh, there you go. Well, I had, of course, talked about India a bit, and I think there's plenty more to speak about that. I hope that Ray will give Philip Hurst and I a chance to have a little forum. But I'd be happy to talk to you about that more when I see you around the ship. It's a bit of a shock going to India that I spoke of, and many of you have been there before. And we now are going to a much more refreshing place. Notice the lack of, what's that stuff called, trash all over the beaches. I mean, I was taken aback that everywhere we went in India is much dirtier and crowded than it used to be. But anyway, we're on our way out into the greater world here. And this is a particularly delicious venues here of the Maldives and Seychelles. There we go. Which are often getting down toward off the subcontinent of India, then out into the Central Ocean. Now, there are quite a few islands in the Indian Ocean. I'll talk about it in my next talk about just the ocean itself. But the Maldives are a group of over 1,200 islands, many of them just little coral atolls and barely above water. And they've often been described in ancient texts, both Indian, Sri Lankan, Greek texts, Arab texts, as these, what do they call a necklace of islands. This is an early 1700s map, which shows you that long stretch. It's actually a bit exaggerated. They're not quite so large, except for sail navigators. This was a very important feat not to run into them, especially sailing in the night, though you're out there in the clear sea and you'd think you could see the land, except that what happens, these islands are so flat. They're the lowest lying land of any islands in the world. The maximum height of these islands is only 7 feet or over 2 meters about. And they stretch down in all these groups of atolls. The ones that are at the very top left-hand corner are the Laccadive Islands. Now, those are part of India, and they are similarly these shallow atolls that are along a ridge that's offshore that have built up with coral and then has made these kind of lagoon atolls, of which only a few out of the 1,200 are inhabited. So this is truly a watery world, very comparable to Polynesia, say, more than any other place in the world, and very subject, unfortunately, to the changes in the seas. Now, we're going to Malé, which is the largest town by far, but the Maldives, as you heard, have become a great resort destination with many luxury resorts being built on ever outer atolls. And now with jet travel, people come down there about 500,000 a year, even though the local population is less than that. Now, this is the flag of the Maldives, and you might know by the green and the crescent, this is an Islamic nation, an independent republic now, with its star and crescent, and of course its palm tree as its symbol. It has suddenly become, via tourism, a fairly prosperous country with the average income over about $9,000 US dollars a year, making them one of the most prosperous nations, far more than India or Sri Lanka, the neighbors. And this is an example of how tourism can completely change a place. But prior to the 1960s and jet travel, this was a sleepy fishing communities strung along the middle of the ocean. But they go back quite far in history. In fact, in prehistory, we don't even know when people first went there. They may have been drifters in the transmigration of people from Africa to India, and there's been people crossing the seas, and undoubtedly people came shipwrecked and then stayed and started fishing. This is the oldest document in the National Library, which is in a kind of a Sinhalese, Sri Lankan style script related to southern Indian languages, but it documents the Buddhist tradition of the islands, because it is said that King Ashoka himself, the great Buddhist emperor of India in 400 AD, sent missionaries here and established Buddhist teachings and built large stupas. Now, this is one on an island called Gan Island that was cut out of coral and then raised up and then because of the way it began to sink in the sand, and then it became a mound covered with vegetation. And when a British official was stationed in the Maldives, he called on archaeologists to come and help him dig and discover more about this Buddhist tradition. But all of the temples have disappeared into the sand. But this is a traditional North Indian style Buddhist temple, circular with a great mound on it, with usually holding inscriptions, and then be used for teaching of the Dharma, the Buddhist faith. Now these have all disappeared, and the local people have actually dug, taking away the original stone, and also digging, looking for more artifacts or artifacts to sell. So they're all demolished now, unfortunately. Then came Islam. In the 9th century AD, Arabic sailors came over, set up trading posts, and then converted the island to Islam, which it remains to this day. This is one of the earliest writings found in the Maldives in Arabic. And so all of these atolls have very small communities. Almost everyone lives in Malé, the major city. And Malé was once like this. This is one of the atolls, but they filled it in and built a city upon these low-lying atolls. Now this is Adu Abu, which is an atoll that was used as a Royal Air Force base during World War II. Now the islands became British protectorate in 1887, and that continued to 1965, but it was used as a fueling base for transshipment of people from Burma, India, the Middle East during World War II with these great flying boats. And the British government used to pay £2,000 a year for the right to have an Air Force base there. And then after the war and after the independence of India, it was withdrawn and is now just an atoll again. But this is Malé, where we will be coming in to dock. And it is you can see that it's sort of filled in on a coral reef with construction. And what they've done is they pumped up sand and material to make this not such a large city. It has about 100,000 people in it. But that is the political, cultural, and economic center of all of the islands. Now, it is also a very crowded city because, as you see, there's no land other than what has been put in there and what facilities are there. And we'll come in and dock, and we can walk all around town. It's a very small city, actually, and there are a couple of tours that go to the mosques and the museums and such. But it has become a waypoint for shipping and for visitors, especially. You see the mega yachts in the distance, just like ours. But it's very low-lying, and so that it is particularly concerned about the problems of the rising sea, and also they were hit by the tsunami in 2004, which of course was off of Indonesia. But these islands have no shelf, and so the tsunami came and washed over many of them. 6 islands were completely lost, and then the city of Malé was all flooded. There were about 120 people killed. Many of the resorts had to shut down for lack of electricity and damage, but it's mostly been repaired. But this is just one of the problems of living on a beautiful island like this. And so it is famous for its beautiful beaches and its palm trees, and there's not much to say about it except that it's a beautiful place. It is not, doesn't look like Cochin. And the people are mostly fishing, but now the largest employment in the whole string of islands is tourism. So you have all of these resorts being put out into what were uninhabited islands, and many of them had no native Maldivians. But they've gone out there to live in the resorts and to provide the services. You'd have to originally get around by boat, and this is a stretch of islands almost 1,000 miles long from the farthest north to the south. So it was a very remote place. And what's happened is because of jet travel and proximity to India, and of course flights from Dubai and flights from Singapore, this has become a major resort area with very upscale accommodations. So I was reading that some of these charge up to $5,000 US to go out and live in a thatched hut on a deserted island. Now, there are many choices like that in the world, but this one is particularly fashionable. Even, I believe it was Prince William and Kate went out there for one of their many honeymoons. So it has a particular contrast between especially the European and international visitors coming there for vacation and let's say all of the pleasures that you would expect that they would have, and then the Islamic or the Muslim servers and residents. And this has become a bit of a problem there. I'll talk about it in a minute. But meanwhile, you can just enjoy the view of it, if not the heat and the humidity. No, it's not as humid as in India, or much less as crowded, because there's sea breezes out here. So it's especially pleasant. And as we go out into the center ocean, we don't have that sort of radiant heat you get in the mainland or in the cities especially. So here you can pick your bungalow. I'll be the third one on the left. And but it's logistically it's a real problem. How do you maintain and supply all these resorts? Well, that's the business. And they've become more luxurious and more remote all the time out here as they develop further out into the vast string, the necklace of islands it's called. And the dining choices are also quite remarkable. Now, this is the one thing on this great ship we do not have. But that's okay. Here's a new resort being built which features a floating island. Now, this is put into a little atoll, but as the seas rise, they think that all of the infrastructure will float up with all of the thatched-topped huts, and the big swimming pool in the center will actually float up with the rising sea. Now, I would say this is an offering. You can look it up. It's called The Star, and I recommend you buy now before the price goes down again. But meanwhile, back in Malé, in the few towns that there are, as I said, they have become so prosperous, they've been building new mosques. Now, this is the old Good Friday Mosque, which actually dates to the 1600s, and it's made again out of coral stone. There's another one that's new, the Al-Hum Malé Mosque, which looks like a space center to me, with the minaret having looks like a radar dome instead, but that's modern Islam. And there's a lot of mixture of people. The native Maldivians are mostly from Indian or Arabic extraction, and so they're kind of a mixed cultural quality to them. And in the narrow streets and the shops of Malé, you can see the variety of the Asian people that are there. And it's becoming more and more Islamic as time goes on, due to the nature of the world as it is around. Now, when the UK gave independence to the Maldives, this was the second president, Abdul Goyum. The previous one was so corrupt that he was overthrown quickly. And this one was the president for quite a while, but the island is, or rather all these islands are said to be run by 5 families who have been there for 1,000 years, and however intermarried they may be, they're all squabbling over various things. One analyst called it the island soap opera: who's going to be in charge, who married whom, et cetera, et cetera. But because of the tourism boom, they become incredibly wealthy, so there's more to discuss. Now, this was the first contested presidential election. Was won by Mohammed Nasheem about 5 years ago. And he started investigating the accounting of the funding of the government, and then he was most famous for making a protection alliance with India. These are Indian-built helicopters that are being welcomed over to the Maldivian Navy. They have a lot of trouble with drug smuggling from Africa and other places. It's an easy place to run things through, so they have some defense forces there. But the president, Nasheem, was most famous when he had a cabinet meeting underwater to appeal to the United Nations to help the island protect itself from rising sea levels, especially after the tsunami did so much damage. And this is a plan that they have now made formal, that they are going to take people from the outer islands and put them into islands that can be seawalled around so that they can live even as their original island will perhaps disappear. Now, the average height of all these islands is only less than a meter, 2 feet about. So any storm comes and washes them over anyway, but as the seas are rising, then they will all be displaced and be on compounds, essentially. There's a film called Island president, about him, because he's become a prisoner in his own country by trying to root out some of the local corruption. And they had a rally after he had been deposed by the military, and the rally outside the government office was attacked by a gang that sprayed gasoline all over everybody and then beat up the president, the ex-president. He just resigned. And so he's become somewhat of icon of how these small countries, after they get their independence, are often not very well managed, and they end up in terrible squabbles. But meanwhile, it's a peaceful place. But as you can see, the women are now covering their heads and not wearing bikinis, except underneath, perhaps. And it's a very interesting contrast to see these people. Let's say, I think it's the only Islamic resort islands in the world, unless you can find more. Well, the message of Islam is peace and love, so here you get your very own island to express that. And so thousands come in and enjoy themselves in spite of the troubles with the local government, let's say. But it's a beautiful place in so many ways, so that you can even, I like this one, because you have a swimming pool right next to the ocean in case you prefer fresh water. So we will be there tomorrow afternoon, and then off to the Seychelles after another day. So we'll get time to walk around the town, go see it, and then enjoy it. Now next is the Seychelles, which are to the southwest of the Maldives. So we have 2 sea days to get there. I hope you're enjoying sea days. And I'll be talking about more things in case you're interested. But this is getting toward the African coast, of course, north of Madagascar. And these are, again, a string of islands. There's not as many as in the Maldives. There are about 400, including all the small ones, all through this area. And the main one being Mahé, where we'll go first to Victoria. Then we'll go up to La Digue. And this is not so far from Madagascar. Now, Victoria is the capital. And then we'll go up to La Digue and Preslin. Now, these are different islands because they were formed as a collision of certain plates, so they're not atolls, except those are built around most of it. It's more mountainous and has all these granite upcrops and sedimentary. And so this is just an illustration of how the islands were formed by the different splitting of the continents and the uprises, and then so there's this whole let's say, array of islands that are out into the Indian Ocean, leftovers from the tectonic plates. But again, it's a beautiful beach, but note they already have highlands right near the beaches. So this is more like going into the Caribbean West Indies. So you have mountainous islands and some are flat. These are mountainous. And so they have more forest, they have upland plantations. And again, the history of it is related to migration from mostly Africans came there as slaves to work on the plantations after the islands were discovered by the French. And then the British came and in the 7 Years' War battled over these islands along with a few other possessions in the Indian Ocean. Of course, this was so far away and rather at the end of the line for the empire, but you can see this this old chart says Las Siete Hermanos. For some reason, it's all in Spanish. That is the 7 sisters, which is what they call the central group. It includes La Digue, by the name. La Digue is the name of a ship originally. But again, this island group became a colony of first France and then Britain, and then it got its independence. But here's an example of back when it was a British Indian Ocean territory, of the pirate tradition. These were famously the lairs of the Indian Ocean pirates, including Captain Kidd from my hometown of New York, that pirate center. And he came out here along with lots of French and other brigands. And so this is still full of local tales of where they buried their loot. But meanwhile, in Victoria, the old capital in colonial times till now, you can see the period tropical veranda architecture that's still there. Then over the centuries, the African slaves were freed, and then Indians came, Malaysians came, and so you have, again, a cultural mix of different people that have ended up living in these beautiful islands, sort of but they've never been very wealthy. When they had sugar cane, that was a great crop, just like in the Caribbean. And then they have diversified to, again, mostly tourism is the economy. They do grow some spices, and they have some timbering and different things. This guy's holding cinnamon sticks. But you can see by his face, he seems to be maybe African, Indian, probably a little French in there somehow. And there's an island culture, like many parts of the world, where the people mingle and then they become their own culture. In this case, the language is Creole, French, and English mixed with a little bit of Indian, a little bit of African words, the Swahili. This is a coconut picker. And again, a tropical environment but with sea breezes. Here's a pure coconut house. But again, fishing is a major source of food. And both the Maldives and the Seychelles are major fish processing countries now. They have built processing for their own territorial waters. Again, the Seychelles has a vast ocean around a few islands. So like Polynesia and other islands, they need the income from fishing. Well, here's Victoria, supposedly the smallest capital city of an independent nation, smaller than Malé and the Maldives. But we'll dock there and can walk around town quickly, and there are tours to the local museums and off to the beaches and the entertainment we have. But it looks very British, and it had been, of course, a crown colony until 1976, with its copy of a London clock. And back in the earlier days when it was difficult to get there, except by ship, it was a sleepy place. Now, of course, tourists come flying in every day. But on this particular stamp, there's the giant tortoise, which I'll talk about in a minute. But here's the governor back in the mid-'70s reviewing the troops. And again, there was a peaceful evolution to independence. And then once it had its own government, all of the local disputes took over, and they've had a couple of coups d'etats, and I'd say the kind of tropical intrigue of politics. Usually it all happens before lunchtime and nap time, so it's not very, let's say, revolutionary in these kind of places, but it goes on as an independent country now. This was the original crown flag, and now it's still a member of the Commonwealth. But they chose this as their new flag, which actually is, among flags, is a pretty happy-looking flag. And their motto, Finis Coronat Opus, which is we're going to finish the work of the crown, whatever that may be. Again, you see the tortoise on the bottom. Here's the current president, Pierre de Jean, and he is of French mixed extraction, but and the picture of the former Governor General up there. But the biggest problem they've had in recent times, if you've been following this bad news, are the Somali pirates. They have come out in their motherships off the Seychelles Islands and used their techniques, you can see it in the movie Captain Phillips, to board and seize vessels. Most seriously, they captured the couple, the Chandlers, the British couple that were sailing a private vessel, who were finally released. But the Seychelles military force is working with the other international force in the area to try to suppress this. But this is a great, 1,500 miles off the coast of Africa, so this is quite an operation for the Somali pirates to get out there. And when they get there, they might just take a vacation and go to the beach instead of go to all the trouble of pirating, because these islands, again, are exquisite. Now, this is a coral run other than the high mountain ones, and many, again, are uninhabited, so you can pick your own. The ones that are larger and have air service or ferry service are now developing as resorts and retirement communities. Here's a view of the Durban to Seychelles yacht race, which is quite a difficult one. It's probably more difficult than the Sydney to Hobart race. But once you're there, again, you're in the lap of tropical luxury and lays. But because of this mountainous quality, there's all these dramatic scenery. Like, again, it looks a lot like the British West Indies, with the developments all there. Now, this is Eden Island, which is one of the premier developments where, again, you can get timeshare or bring in your mega yacht, whatever you feel like doing on your holiday. And resorts. This is the Kempinski Resort. So the size of the tourism has just grown exponentially over the years, and of course they're there for the sun and the sand. Also fishing. This is a striped stonefish, which is it's curious because it looks like it could have devoured the fishermen there. And here's a marlin. So these are fairly full seas with fish life because they've created their economic exclusion zone. They haven't sold their rights to the international fishing fleet. And so this is one of the healthier parts of all of Asia for fish. And then, of course, the guardian Aldabra tortoise keeps watch over this. This is the comparable to the Galapagos tortoises, and it's been on these islands for millions of years. They were almost taken to extinction by sail vessels coming and picking them up and putting them on the ships for food. But now they're protected and they have a breeding program, and so they're fairly happy. This one looks almost like he's about to smile, if tortoises smile. But again, they're one of the attractions of the island, though you're not allowed to sit on them and ride them around. But look at these toenails. Hasn't been to the spa, but it's used for digging in the soil and on the beaches for different foods that they'll dig out, insects and fruits and things that they'll eat. They're sort of an omnivore. Here's an endemic paradise flycatcher, which is unique to the Seychelles. And this is a special palm. It's called a coco de mer. And the plant doesn't look very unusual. This is in the Val de Mai on Preslin Island. This is a rare coconut. It only grows here because it grows in a double bunch. And it doesn't look so unusual in the forest, but it has a mythical life that I'll go through with you. I think we're all adults, yes. So here's the double coconut that grows. And this is after it's been fertilized by the male pistil and stamen, and then the coconut grows into a double shape, and these are very big. And this is confounded Europeans when they came here. So this is the only coconut that keeps men up at night. Well, and so it became a fashion to pick these things up. Now, this is one washed up on the beach as they spread around the islands, and they're all actually all over the islands now. But what can I say? There are no two coconuts that are the same, but I'll leave that to your discussion. And so if you have not bought a souvenir yet on the trip, this is a real bargain. But, and in the local people, they think that this has magical qualities, which I'll leave again to your imagination. And some writer said this must have been the Garden of Eden before they picked that apple of knowledge. Well, anyway, then we're going to go from Victoria up to La Digue, which is the smaller island near Preslin Island. And again, we're going away from a city and into a natural setting. This is a very small island. Chris of the destination office described how you get a bicycle here. You can just go right around the island. It's fairly flat. And again, a very quiet life there, just a few resorts, but it's mostly famous for its great beaches. Here's the Grand Anse, and the Anse Source de l'Argent, the source of silver. I don't think the silver they may have found was probably pirate silver, but you can see the granite outcrops. This is the famous feature that's on all the postcards, and symbol of the island is this tremendous sculpted granite on the pristine shores. If you've ever been to the baths in British West Indies, that's comparable, where you can actually go and swim between boulders at high tide and have a little siesta in their shade. But this is the stuff of many a photo shoot and a romantic vacation, just because it contrasts the mountains and the rocks versus the sea. Now, this is a rare picture I found of sea fog moving in and creating a landscape that is quite unique for this island. And people come down there for weddings and holidays. And so this is a bit of a Photoshop special about you too can get married again in the Seychelles. And you can see this couple really went out on a limb. Well, that's what love is all about, and coconuts. And here's a model shoot where she was out and swimming and found this fisherman had thrown this plastic wrapping in the ocean. So she decided she'd make a point about it with her plastic bikini. So people have a lot of fun there, especially if you go diving. Now, there is a trip diving in Maldives tomorrow. But the Seychelles, to protect its seas, has made, let's say, marine sanctuaries because they don't want to be the fate of so many other islands that have destroyed their reefs and fished out the waters, and now they wonder why there's no food and nobody comes. So this is one of their reserves, though the guard there does not who you want to meet as you come diving in. It looks like he only eats supermodels, though, I think. And I won't bore you with too many fish pictures, but both the Maldives and the Seychelles are just full of fish because, again, they're protected, and so you can go diving and see things that you may not see anywhere else. This is a giant grouper, which grow to 500 or 600 pounds, and they're tremendous. Fortunately, they don't like to eat small divers. But here's the whale shark, and if you're a diver, this is sort of one of the big icons to swim along with. They're not actually a whale. They are the world's largest shark, and they are a baleen feeder where they just bring in small things and they filter that out and swallow it. So it's very easily to be confused with an actual whale, but has different skin and different evolution. And people can actually just sort of sit on them and ride along as they slowly go around. Unfortunately, they become the object of fishing for some of the international fishing fleets because, like whaling, if you catch one of those, that's your day. And now they sell whale shark meat in China, unfortunately. Now, if you go further, you will see more creatures, but this is where it gets really dangerous because, as they say, whenever you've finally met one of these, you don't want to go to the surface. And if you meet one like this, well, you may settle forever like a SpongeBob down there. So be careful. But this is the beauty of the Seychelles, and there's not much I can say to express its beauty other than we're lucky to go there. And so here's La Rêve à portée de main, a dream at your fingertips. And I hope you all have a great time there, and see you on the beach. Thank you very much.